Welcome to All Things Chiropractic.
Welcome to another episode of All Things Chiropractic. I'm Paul Andrews.
I'm Dr. Mark Davini. Welcome, everyone.
And we should have had the Twilight Zone like music playing in the background for this one. Yeah.
How's that?
I just said that so he would do that, everyone.
Thank you.
Play it right into my hands.
Yeah. You are no longer in control of your television set.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the
that was the prelude to the Twilight Zone, right?
Either that or the Outer Limits. I'm not sure which one.
I think the Outer Limits came first. Maybe I don't know.
Way back.
You tell us, people.
Yeah. It was in black and white when it came out. Let's put it that way.
Right. Exactly. Healthcare from a patient's perspective is what we're going to dig into today.
Yeah. What they see is what you get.
I know I've said this before, but I always, when I see and hear the word perspective, it always brings me back to that episode in a very big podcast out there, and the host had an ex or a retired CIA field agent, and he asked the best question to this agent. He said, "You have an up and coming field agent, starting. What is the best advice you can give that agent who's going to be out in the field?" Now, we know this is pretty dangerous, precarious work. Whether or not
chiropractic.
Yes. Whether or not it emulates what TV shows, but either way, we know it's dangerous work. And so this ex or retired agent said that having perspective, not perception, is your biggest key to success, meaning from my impression of his comment, it would keep you alive. So the difference, right? So perception is how you see the world. Perspective is how somebody else sees the world. And I thought that was awesome advice.
It is. And that's really why we're talking about what the patient sees when they come in your office, what they feel, what they think, what's going on in their head. If you can get inside their head, then you can make them understand more about what's going on in your office.
Be very afraid of trying to get into some people's heads, though.
Be very afraid.
All right. So
my saying is, get out of there. There's not enough room for the two of us.
Yeah, right. At least you didn't say the three of us. Anyway.
Yes.
So what are the big things, Doc? Let's start somewhere.
Well, I think we should start with the big elephant in the room when it comes to patients today. It wasn't always this way, but I will say it's been this way for a very, very long time. But it's really about affordability. Let's face it, when it comes to health care, a lot of people might fear that they can't afford it or they're going to take it and can't pay for it. It's the real elephant in the room. And even though a lot of people will do whatever they have to do, especially when the perceived value is high enough, nobody ever says no to life-saving things, even if it's going to put them in debt. But they will say no to choices if they perceive the choice as not being real enough for them or not being important enough for them. So we are talking about the perceived value. Practice is only as sound as the patient's perceived value of that practice. So we need to talk about that.
I think in general, this is not specific, but in general, I've seen and experienced the mentality now of a patient is, number one, if my insurance does not cover this, I cannot do it.
I can't
do it.
That won't.
And two, even if it covers it, the copay or my patient share is so high that I can't meet the treatment plan expectations you are asking. It's too expensive every week, every month.
Right. And that's so true in the chiropractic practice today, because even, we'll say, a reasonable and necessary type of fee is generally a fair amount of money out of pocket today, where maybe before, you could offer the service at a less expensive, or we'll say a more affordable fee. So that if you're seeing somebody 2 and 3 times a week, they had to make a choice, and they certainly had to make a value judgment there. But it was easier for them to understand it because you weren't taking mortgage money away from them.
Well, it can be. I mean, physical therapy copays on average have eclipsed $45 a visit. So if you're talking about a $50 copay,
Right.
then you're talking about, and 3 times a week, you're talking about $150 a week.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. That's an expensive ask in a sense. So we do talk about the number one concern a patient has walking into your office is cost. They may not present it as the number one concern, but let's put it this way. It's at least back there in their minds enough that you cannot, or that you should fail to address it. So money is an issue. But if we were to really say what's going on in their head, depending upon the severity of what the presenting condition or the symptoms or whatever it is that the patient comes into your office for, a lot of it is the fear of the unknown. They just don't know what to expect when they're going into your office. Maybe they do. Maybe they've been to chiropractors before. Certainly it's way more common than it ever was in the past, but there's still a certain amount of unknown. And they might understand chiropractic, but maybe their understanding of chiropractic is not what you're going to say to them. They might have a whole different perception of chiropractic because they might have gone to a different type of practitioner last time, if they even went to one.
So it sounds to me like the better you're prepared for these conversations, it comes down to what? Communication, to what? Demonstrate that there's a high value to the service that's being offered.
Absolutely. When we talk about that perceived value, they have to feel that what you're saying they need is what they believe to be necessary, not an option, necessary care in order for them to achieve the health goals that they might have hopefully present to you. So yeah, communication is huge. And we talk about that. We talked in depth sometimes about, personality styles and processing styles for information, which is not part of what we're going to do today, but those are important to understand the patient and at their level and who they are. So their number one concern will be, this fear of the unknown. But then once they have that fear of the unknown handled in one way or another, hopefully, they want to be able to talk to you and tell you what's wrong with them. So it comes right back to what you said, communication.
But okay, I want to talk about a few scenarios because these, to me, one of the doctor's challenges are going to be someone walks in acute distress. They're not really they want you to know that they're in pain, but they want to come out of pain. So as the provider, as the doctor wanting to help ease this person's pain, and that's the easiest time to get these higher copays, right? Because they want to be out of pain.
Yeah,
so it's like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Right? But
two no-brainers just said that.
Yeah, right, exactly. You borrowed my brain, can I have it back?
Yeah.
So, but as they resolve in their symptoms, to me, a patient, not everyone, but most patients, they'll say, well, I'm done. I'm feeling better. I can take, an over-the-counter for the residual and see you later.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times that comes from the fact that you present everything at a time that they're not able to listen. And a lot of times we'll ask docs, well, what do you think the reason why you don't have good follow-through or good retention or you don't have a wellness practice? I don't know. I told them, I explained to them. I said, well, when did you explain it to them? When they were like in so much pain, they didn't even know what day of the week it was? Or did you wait until you got them out of that level of pain where you've already developed a certain amount of understanding and respect for what you do and belief in what you do? And then you have a conversation with them. Too many people think that first visit is to do a data dump. I'm going to tell you everything there is to know about you and everything there is to know about chiropractic, and I'm going to give you the secret of life all in one visit. And it doesn't happen. They're listening to, how do I get out of pain?
Right. And then, but okay, doc, so you hold off on giving them all the explanation because they really just want an explanation of, can you get me out of pain and how quickly, right? I mean, that's beginning anyway.
Yeah, meet them there.
Right. And so if you're a doctor who uses supportive procedures, how do you disconnect the patient thinking it was the electric stim that did it versus the adjustment that did it?
Now you're coming. Now
challenging you.
Now you're coming back to my personal belief. I personally do not believe that anybody should render any supportive procedure of any type to the chiropractic adjustment until the first time the patient tells you they feel better. You're trying to make them understand that the most important thing you can do for them is the adjustment, because all that other stuff can be rendered by somebody else, and usually somebody with better coverage than you. So to me, rendering a supportive procedure on the first visit for the sole purpose of trying to lessen their pain is counterproductive. They could actually come back and say, great, that works. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll see you later. I'm going to buy an electrical stim at CVS and call it a day.
But okay. That being said, there are plenty who will, because it's in their philosophy to throw the kitchen sink at somebody, especially if they're in pain, right? And so how do you navigate that? Because you want to get them out of pain. Perhaps there is, a financial incentive as well, because they'll pay for it. So, the reality is not everyone's going to do that philosophy that you have, whether they should or not. So how do you tackle that in the communication aspect?
Well, I've said this over, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it today. You don't have to be for everybody. So there are people that will want that. And if you design your practice to be different from that, you can have that as your practice design, but you can design it if you want it to be different from that. Then maybe that patient isn't the patient you're trying to nurture in your practice. So it comes out to be, know what you want, know how you want to do it. That's what you present. You don't significantly compromise it. And those that agree with what you have will be the patients that stay with you. And those that don't will go to a practice that has a philosophy or a belief or an approach more in line with what they want. But you do not have to be for everybody.
Yeah, I guess the challenge there is if you're, 5 years out of school and you're mounting in debt, it's going to be really hard not to take everybody in anything. But that's what experience and seasoning do to some
Right, and I'm not saying you don't take them, but you take them and you do what you do. They accept or not accept it, but that doesn't mean you don't try. You do have to try on everybody. And if you know anything about, in a sense, the sales world, they don't hit a home run every time. They put it out there, they put it out there, and they put it out there. But eventually, with enough time, you will gather a practice that is simpatico.
Ooh.
Right?
Fancy now.
Yeah, nice and simpatico. So yes, it is hard. A lot easier for the established practitioner, more difficult for the new one. So maybe there will be somewhere in the middle, your transition approach to care. But if all you ever do is worry about whether or not they're in pain as your primary concern, you'll have this empty bucket practice, this bucket that has holes in it, and it's draining just as fast as you fill it, and you will be struggling and hustling for new patients your whole practice life. And I can tell you, as someone who went through a lot of years in practice, that can be exhausting if that's your approach.
I guess, to me, like the bottom line of that is just know that however you tackle it, there's going to be challenges. And if you're an acute pain clinic, you know that it's a turnover every 60, 90 days on the patient base for the most part.
Yeah, pick what you want. And, when we say healthcare from a patient's perspective, we probably should rename that as your office from your patient's perspective. So you want them to understand you, which means you have to have your office, your philosophy, your belief, your protocols, everything, your fees, everything, how they're going to pay for it. That has to be set. You have to work at that. You shouldn't be fluctuating patient by patient. So it's just important that their perception of your office is the message you want to send. And it has to be consistent. So, communication, very important, very, very important. We talk about, keeping the language simple, kiss it, keep it simple, stupid, right?
It's looking right at me with that stupid, but okay.
Yeah, I know. That's okay. Yeah, we're only two of us in the room, so by process of elimination.
Yeah. Okay. I put a mirror up next time. Anyway, but, it's a good point, because the point is to be, patient-centric, but within your philosophy and your approach as a practitioner, right?
Right. They want your confidence. They want your empathy. They want your understanding. They also want your optimism. They want to know that you can help them, that your experience is going to get them where they want to be. And then you can hopefully transition them to where you want them to be. And I've said it before, Parker always says, give them what they want so that you can give them what they need.
Well, and let me just focus in on that optimism for a moment, because that optimism isn't just the doctor.
Mm-mm.
The staff really need to play into being that oasis of love, as Parker would say, in that office. Because if the doctor's as optimistic as they can be, and then they go out and they're spending more of their time with the assistant, who's either having a bad day, bad week, bad life, it can be a little more challenging.
Wait a minute. Now, are you saying that maybe a podcast on staff productivity would be a good one?
Yeah. And maybe approach as well to patient care.
Exactly. And your attitude has everything to do with it. There's that half glass, the glass is half empty or half full. George Carlin used to always say, no, it's neither. It's just 2 times bigger than it needs to be. Okay. So you have to make everything fit. And to do that, you have to have it clearly defined so that you know the type of patient you want. And that's what eventually, with enough effort and consistency, you'll attract.
And we've talked about some of this before, but what is the message you're putting out there non-orally? Like, what is the internal marketing and signage in your office? What is the philosophy and your mission statement? What does the staff say and or believe in your office?
And this comes down to the business aspect of chiropractic, in that you have to train your staff to say what you want to say, not what they want to say. What you want them to say and how you want them to say it. You don't have all these pain posters up in your office and then try and tell people you're all about wellness. The message has to be clear, because the subtext or the unconscious message comes across far more than the actual oral message, things you say. Because things you say only really account for about 11% of a patient's understanding at the most. So everything over and over again. If it was a matter of saying it once and everybody understood it, you would never see the same commercial twice on TV.
I guess you wouldn't. Yeah. Right. What if I missed it?
Over and over. They just keep drilling that same commercial. Sometimes, ad nauseum. But the whole point is they know you're not going to get the message unless you hear it more than once, and most of the time in more than one way. So when we talk about, being that you have communication with your patients, it's because you keep giving them your message over and over again. It's consistent. There's a continuity to it. There's coordination. Obviously, we want them to feel the caring, and we want them to feel the love that's in your office, because there is a love in your office. You want these people to get well. That's why you went to school. It's what you do. But we also want them to feel that this is the right place to be.
Well, with that, let's talk about some other aspects that we haven't really touched on that much, which is the involvement and empowerment aspect of healthcare with patients.
Oh my God, today it is so demeaning. Healthcare is so demeaning today, right? You go there, you are really one of many, which is the danger in chiropractic, right? Doesn't take long to do what we do. A lot of times patients are in and out in a very short period of time in their minds.
Right.
And now you want them to pay more than something they can, like, say, a massage. They can pay almost the same amount of money for a massage, but they're there for an hour.
But also, with the empowerment comes some challenges with the provider, because now patients can walk in and they've watched like 50 YouTube videos of chiropractic adjustments, from the most bizarre, in my opinion, to the most hostile and aggressive, right? And you're now, but they may present because they just feel like they need relief, and they're scared out of their mind.
Sometimes you spend more time trying to explain what the other person is doing, in a sense, right or wrong. It happened to me just the other day. Somebody said, "Oh, do you know Dr. So-and-so? I met his wife and blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Yeah." He says, "This guy's like a millionaire." And he showed me all his YouTubes about how he takes this strap and wraps it around your head and pulls it from across the room. Right. I said, "Is that chiropractic?"
Yeah.
So now where do I go with that? I know where I go with
Yeah,
that.
I'm gonna say I know where you went with that, but in general, I guess because chiropractic we've talked about in other episodes, doesn't really have this super standard of protocol and procedure. So anything could be, I guess.
Yeah, this guy was kind of thinking of seeing a chiropractor literally until he saw the YouTube. Because he said, well, this guy's very successful. He must be a good doctor. And then he watched his YouTube and he goes, I'm not letting anybody do that to me. And I said, nor should you.
It's hard for me to believe that. I mean, they must get posted because it's doing something for their office. It's hard for me to believe it's helpful, but I guess that I'm not, as a patient, I wouldn't walk into the office, I guess.
And let me go back to what I said, which is, basically they're putting out what they want to do in their office, not hiding it. You walk in that door, you know what you're getting. So there's obviously a certain amount of population out there that wants this. And that's the population this particular office is attracting. So,
but even a what I would say a general diversified osseous technique of the cervical, I don't want to watch that. It doesn't look like it's.
No, but there's obviously enough people that do because the guy has made a very good living doing it.
No. Yeah.
So it goes back to saying, define what you want, make sure they understand what you want, be clear in your communication, make sure that they know that you have their best interests in mind, make it so that there's a way that they can pay for this service, empower them into participating in their health care.
And speaking of communication again, and we've talked that it's not all oral or verbal, your space itself, like how many times have we gone in to do an inspection and we're like, has this person sat where your patients sit? Have they used the bathroom? Have they looked up? I guess it's like smells. If something smells a little weird after a few minutes, you don't notice it. But in your office, I guess, the duct tape on your adjusting table that's starting to fray, you don't notice.
Stick to the clothing of your patients as they get off your table. They pull the tape with it,
I mean, there's some offices we've seen that are really spectacular, and there's some that you just wonder, what is a patient thinking when they walk into this office for the first time when it just doesn't look super clean, professional?
Yeah. And their answer might be, well, I'm pretty busy. I said, but think about what level of standard they hold you at, and that's what they think of you. So they have relegated your existence to that level. You're thinking maybe you're at a higher level in their minds, and they're saying, well, no, I only need to come in and get my crack, and I'm good. I don't care. If the guy doesn't charge me more, what the other guy down the street charges me who has nice equipment, I don't care. I'll put up with the rip in the table because all I need is my crack.
I'm going to isolate that for the social media right there. That one statement.
That's it right there. So it just, it is everything. It's the whole package. If you think there is something not seen, heard, smell, taste, touch, whatever, if you think any of that is escaping your patients, you're really mistaken. They may not tell you. But you're mistaken if you think anything is going on in that office that isn't caught. I mean, how many times do you have your staff doing and saying things that they think they're getting away with because it's never commented on, but it's there.
So what do you think the patient's perspective right now is on the quickly evolving AI in healthcare?
Right now, I'm not sure they're getting any sense of how potentially altering AI can be to their healthcare. Because to them, they're still in contact with their doctors. They don't know how much their doctors are or are not incorporating AI into their practice. But when they get to the point where they go to their doctor's office and they start talking to HAL 2000, and that becomes the person that diagnose you and make recommendations, I think they're going to find that this is a changing world. And it's happening. It's already there. Medscape had an article in just this morning saying, will AI replace the stethoscope? And the short answer to that is yes.
Among a million other things. I mean, that's
exactly.
This this podcast itself, this episode
Yeah.
may be a bit antiquated, but
By the time it comes out.
by the time it comes out, right? I mean, we've already done an AI podcast. We're going to probably be doing them more regularly because it is the speed of light how things are changing.
Oh. And this hasn't changed. I remember at one point in practice, I had to change my computers. So I said, I want that feeling of being state of the art. So at the time, I went on Dell, and whatever question they asked me, I just went right to the biggest, the fastest, the most powerful, the most this and the most that. I said, I ordered this computer. And I said, I am there for whatever time it is. At least I will be state of the art. The computer arrives, and in the box with my computer was the new catalog
Of course.
with the new Dell that was more powerful than the one I just bought.
Oh, yeah.
I said, the fact that it actually was able to be sent to me meant that it was outdated.
Oh, yeah. It was funny. I saw on social media, they had this picture. It was a couple of guys. This was, decades ago. They were wheeling out this big thing. It was probably, 3 feet wide by about 10 feet long and 8 feet high. It weighed almost a ton. And they were wheeling it into a truck, and they said, this is IBM's first 5 megabyte server.
5 megabytes.
That's not even a picture.
Yeah.
Now, you're in your phone. And this thing weighed almost a ton.
Yeah. And you don't think perception changes? When I bought my first computer, and it was the Parker Turnkey computer. And it wasn't even a Windows computer. It was a CPM programming, which wasn't even true DOS at the time, as we knew it. And I remember the selling point to him was, this has 20 megabytes. You will never fill that in a lifetime.
In a lifetime. Sure.
Never. Like Paul said, there are pictures that have more than that now.
Oh, this
podcast recording is more than that.
Yeah. Well, now these AI data centers, they're just humongous information farms that consume a ton of resources.
Yeah. Here's a thought, though.
Yeah.
Something happens. Okay. We had an earthquake in Massachusetts a couple months back. Minor one, like 4 point something or whatever, but I actually felt it in my office. Shake.
Yeah.
First time I ever experienced an earthquake. I went to my wife and I said, was that an earthquake? And of course, yes, right? She felt it too. Go online. I can't imagine that it was more than 3 minutes after it happened. And they were already talking about, earthquake felt in Plymouth, Mass.
Yeah.
Who sits there and puts this stuff on the internet? Is there some person who you can look up virtually anything on the internet? Who's the person sitting in their basement entering all this stuff?
You're dating yourself, my
I know.
man. You're aging
That's
yourself.
what I mean. This is the advancement of technology.
Oh, yeah.
That
A lot of this happens automatically. Man.
Automatically.
It's all just
AI generated, in a sense.
Well, you can't even tell something. This is not an AI podcast, but I can't help myself. You can't even tell now. I have a friend who he does staffing, and he said, we're now battling these AI applicants, and we have to get them on video. We have to get them to move a certain way, show their ID, because
they're not even people.
People have hired AI remote workers. Hello.
So if we circle it back to,
we digress.
Chiropractic practice from the patient perspective, the patient's perspective is constantly changing now. So you better be aware of this concept, number one, all the aspects of the concept, some of which we spoke of in this podcast, and recognize that tomorrow it could even be a little bit different.
And some of which you can control and some of which you can't. So that which you control inside your four walls and what you put out there, control it so it matches your philosophy, your approach to practice.
Consistency.
Boy, is it ever.
Yeah. Here's a closing thought. Your values create your experience. Your experience creates your life. Dan Millman said that. I don't know Dan Millman. Do you know Dan?
No, it sounds like a Seinfeld character, though. Sorry, Dan.
Sorry, Dan. But thank you for that wonderful quote.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for listening to All Things Chiropractic. I'm Paul Andrews.
Dr. Mark Davini. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to All Things Chiropractic. We'd love to hear from you. Visit allthingschiropractic.com with comments, episode ideas, or questions. Or connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at All Things Chiropractic Podcast. Be sure to join Dr. Mark Davini and Paul Andrews next time for another episode of All Things Chiropractic.